Welcome to Movie Oubliette, the film review podcast for movies that most people have mercifully forgotten.
I'm Dan.
And I'm Conrad, and in each episode, we drag a forsaken film out of the oubliette,
Discuss it and judge it to decide whether it should be set free
or whether it should be thrown back and consigned to oblivion forever. We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette. Who knows what cinematic evil lurks in the hearts of men? The movie oubliette knows. Welcome to episode 148 of the Equator Straddling podcast for forgotten fantastical films with me, Conrad, rediscovering my love of Command and Conquer in Cambridge, UK.
Whoa, that takes me back. And me, Dan, refreshed and returned from camping in Melbourne, Australia.
Ooh. We focus on forgotten fantasy, sci-fi and horror films because we love travelling to New York in a sarcophagus, telepathic socialites, and knives with a personality. Oh, hello, Dan.
Hello, Conrad. Yes. Command and Conquer. Wow. I was never good at that game, but I had many friends that played it.
Yeah. It's my type of game, sort of slow burn, real-time strategy.
Yeah.
Defend yourself, steal all the resources, build up an army of tanks, and then blast the hell out of people.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I've discovered a way to get it to run on Windows 11. And now I am playing my old game that I loved from 2003, Command and Conquer Generals.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, so the original version as well?
It's the original version of the game. You can still download it from Steam. Is that what it's called? Steam?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And you can get it to run on Windows 11 with this special patch that fans have put together to sort of sort it out. And it plays like a dream. It's lovely.
Wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, I'm too old to learn new games, Dan. I'm just going to play the old ones.
Yeah, that's fine. I've got a lot of friends that play old games, actually. So, and there are so many ways you can do it now as well. And you can even, like, the old consoles or replica consoles to play it like you used to, that sort of thing. So, you know.
Yeah. I know, I love it. I guess I'm into retro gaming. That's what I'll say.
Ah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And you're back from camping.
Yeah. So currently on 2 weeks leave from work. So we decided to go camping just for a few days. We went to a place called Echuca, which is like the northern town in Victoria where we live. It's right on the border. So we did hop on over to New South Wales a few times. So that was nice. But it was just good to get away and, you know, sleep on the ground and make food on a little gas stove and, you know, use a communal
Sounds like
shower.
Absolute hell to me.
No, I love it. I don't know, when it's just the basics. It's something enjoyable about it for me. And also we took the dog as well and went on some walks and went on a paddle steamer. Baxter's first boat he's ever been on.
Oh, did he behave?
He was okay. He was freaked out by anything making loud noises. So when the steamer first started, he was like, "What is that?" But he calmed down. But he was pretty good, actually. Not too bad.
Oh, cool. Yeah. No, my idea of roughing it is premium economy.
Yeah, I know. I know. You have a different idea of enjoyment and relaxation.
And comfort. Yeah. I wouldn't be able to relax in that situation at all.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. I just love just being uncomfortable. I don't know.
Strange.
It really just like calms me and I feel so refreshed after. Like I come back and it's like, like a bed feels much more comfortable after camping, but you need to have the camping first to appreciate the bed after.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, glad to see you back refreshed.
Yeah. Thank you. So, any mailbag today, Conrad?
Yes, we heard from John, who said, I did not have the pleasure of watching The Abominable Snowman prior to hearing this episode on a drive back from our summer place. A decent film to spend an afternoon with once we were home. Peter Cushing is always wonderful to watch, and the subtle way the creature was presented reminds us less is more. Wish more modern films in the genre took a page from this book.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. And we heard, rather disappointingly, from Serge of Cold Crash Pictures.
Oh.
Hello, Serge.
Hello, Serge.
He said, I can't find a copy of The Watcher in the Woods anywhere in the States.
Wow.
Besides, like, a used DVD for $20. So I'm going to be listening to Movie Oubliette totally blind this week. Hasn't happened in a couple of years.
Oh. Is it not on Disney Plus?
No.
Wow.
No, I don't think it is.
Wow.
Yeah. It's one of those dark Disney period things where they've kind of squirreled it away.
Oh, strange. Yeah, I don't know. It was such an enjoyable film for me.
Yeah. I might have just secretly sent him a file that he could watch.
Okay.
Maybe.
Okay.
But you didn't hear it here. But yes, that might explain why we didn't have more reactions to The Watcher in the Woods. But if you do manage to catch it, then please do let us know. We love hearing from you.
Yeah, we do.
So, Dan, what are we watching this week?
Yes, I'll find out in a second. Okay, I'm in some sort of room with tubes.
Oh.
All these tubes. Oh, something's come out of one.
Strange.
Oh, it's a movie.
Oh, okay.
There's a ruby ring here. Should I put this on?
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm not part of the society. I'll come back.
Hey, psychically I'm very well endowed.
I'm back.
Okay. What did you bring?
So today we will be discussing from 1994 the action fantasy movie The Shadow, directed by Russell Mulcahy. Is it Mulcahy or Mulcahy?
I've always said Mulcahy, but I'm probably wrong.
Yeah. Anyway, directed by Russell Mulcahy, written by Walter B. Gibson, who created the characters, and also David Koepp. It stars Alec Baldwin, Jone Lone, Penelope Ann Miller, Peter Boyle, Ian McKellan, and Tim Curry.
Ooh. And what happens in this movie?
Wow. Set just after the First World War, Lamont Cranston, a ruthless warlord in Tibet, leads a life of villainy and excess. But one fateful day, he is kidnapped and presented to the holy Tulku, who teaches him to mend his ways and harness the power of hypnosis, altering the perception of those around him to become invisible. 7 years later, Lamont Cranston, returns to New York, and becomes the city's vigilante hero, the Batman, the Shadow. But who should become Cranston's ultimate foe? Well, it's Genghis Khan's last descendant, Shiwan Khan, with his evil plan of setting off a yet-to-be-invented atomic bomb. Will the Shadow's ruby ring-wearing secret society and sultry, soft-focused love interest Margot help him save the day? Or will 90s CGI prevail? We'll find out after the break.
We will. And we will be joined by a very special guest to help us out.
Yes, we will.
Our special guest today is one of the best-loved retrospective movie and video game reviewers, the director of the definitive documentary on Street Fighter II, and the owner of an enviable Laserdisc collection. It's Oliver Harper. Hello, sir.
Hey.
Hello, guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome.
I look forward to chatting about, the upcoming movie we're about to explore.
Yeah,
Yes. Well, speaking of upcoming movies, I was very excited to hear that as well as making the leap from creating creating and editing retrospective reviews and video essays on YouTube to being a feature-length documentary filmmaker, that you've now taken the leap into editing an action movie. How did that go?
Oh, it was a lot of fun, actually. It was, also the first kind of movie to edit outside of making a documentary. But I tried to not let it daunt me, get too stressed about it. It was, I got sent these 2 massive hard drives and the script. And I really had the most fun just editing the dialogue scenes. I worked with the fight choreographer on the fight scenes. I didn't want to mess those up because we've all seen movies where the fight scenes, you kind of hear the stories afterwards where they cut them all down or they didn't do a good job of it. I tried to sort of make sure that the integrity of what the fight choreographer had designed remained in the movie. It took a couple of months to do that, and then there's more fine-tuning to do afterwards. And once it's Paul Herzog, who did the score to Bloodsport and Kickboxer, was providing the music coming out of retirement.
Wow.
And once you hear that kind of scored to the picture, because Paul Herzog said to me, Oliver, your editing, your timing is so perfect for a composer to match the beats of his music. And I was like, wow, it made his job very easy. But it's very exciting to sort of do that. And it's out, I think in May, and I'm going to the premiere. I think they're having a premiere screening in Germany, in Dusseldorf, at the end of this month of April, and they're playing it in German.
Oh,
I won't know what's going on, what they're saying. Well, I will know, but it will be in German. But when I see it, I just want to be there to see their reactions.
yeah. What's the title of the movie?
Oh, sorry, The Last Kumite. So it's obviously a play on it's Bloodsport, which is all the whole song in the film by Stan Bush is Kumite. You hear people shouting. So it's a film that's a complete throwback to that.
Ooh.
It's full of all the cliches. Yeah. All the cheese. It's got Stan Bush songs, and there's montages everywhere. So which were the best to do, trying to editing to music, to a music track you've already got. Yeah. Is so much fun.
Yeah.
So that was a blast.
That's amazing.
It sounds great. I heard an interview where you were going into it with some trepidation, but obviously it must have worked out well because I see your name attached to another movie now.
I know. Yeah. The producers, bless him, Sean David Lowe, he had said, "Oh, we're going to do another film." And I said, "Oh, great." And he'd already put my name down on IMDb. He's very efficient in that way. And I was like, "Oh, I'm doing this, am I? Okay." That's filming at the end of the year, and I've got like a 2-month turnaround, I think, to edit the film. So that will be December, January, I think.
Right.
So obviously, I'm going to say to him, I need some time off for Christmas. I'm not editing over Christmas, because I'll be eating food and drunk.
Of course. Brilliant. Oh, I can't wait to see it.
Yeah.
So it's an action film that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
From 1994, The Shadow. To kick us off, Oliver, tell us about your history with this movie. When did you first see it?
It would have been on VHS in 1995.
Wow.
Because weirdly, it didn't show in the local cinema, as far as I'm aware. Because back in the day, cinema listings, you got to check the newspaper.
Yes.
And one in Cambridge, which is now a Wetherspoons pub. And it didn't show there. I think it must have showed in like Peterborough or something like that. But yeah, I saw it because I was a big fan of Superman. I was collecting all the comics. And there would be advertising The Shadow in the back of the comic. I was like, oh my God, this looks great. And then go to check the cinema listings. Nothing. So, right, okay. And then suddenly it comes out on VHS. And I really enjoyed it at the time as a kid, but you could see the kind of problems which we'll probably explore a bit in this podcast. Because around that time, you had Rocketeer, The Phantom would come in 96, and also Dick Tracy and The Mask. It was kind of weird change where Batman was so successful. In 89, everyone thought, or Hollywood thought, well, let's try and make movies that have this kind of 1940s, 30s kind of vibe to it, production design-wise. And The Shadow was very much a comic before Superman and Batman. Batman's clearly very heavily inspired by The Shadow. And I thought this was a kind of a really good kind of introduction to that character for me, because I wasn't familiar with the radio show and all the comics of The Shadow. So it just felt so different to what I'd experienced with, say, Superman and Batman. Well, Batman to a certain degree, but things like The Rocketeer, and it felt quite refreshing, but it seemed to, obviously it died on its arse, when it came out.
It did, yeah, which is the reason why I had never seen it before. I don't think you did either, did you, Dan?
I thought I hadn't, but there were a few scenes that I somehow remembered, like the scene at the start with the guy almost getting thrown off the bridge with the concrete blocks on his feet. I remember that. And I remember that line, the sun is shining, but the ice is slippery. That is like ingrained in my brain. And I don't know why.
Wow.
The rest of the movie, don't recall it. But for some reason, those two scenes. Yeah, this was essentially a first watch for me.
Yeah. Same for me. I probably grew up around about the same time as you did, Oliver. So back then, you didn't have multiplexes really. You had 2 screens if you were lucky. And obviously, they would pick the 2 films that had landed the best in the US market because it wouldn't be a day and date release. Sometimes in the UK, you'd wait sort of 3 months. So you were always excited when you had like a rich friend that was just back from a holiday in the States and they'd seen all the summer blockbusters before you had.
Yeah.
And The Shadow was just one of those ones where it didn't do well in the box office. I think it grossed 48 million worldwide on a reported 40 million budget.
Yeah.
So it sank without a trace. It was released for the July the 4th weekend in 1994, where it entered the chart at number 3 behind The Lion King and Speed, which had been occupying the top 2 spots for 4 weeks at that point. And it dropped like a stone thereafter following the release of Forrest Gump and True Lies. It's just one of those ones that never really got its day in theatres and then perhaps was rediscovered on VHS, but I didn't even pick it up then, so I'd never seen it until now.
Wow. Yeah. It must have made some money for Universal ultimately at the end of the day on VHS and broadcast things and rental stuff. But it's a movie that kind of, distinct way. I think maybe the marketing didn't work or the people just didn't know of The Shadow. I think that's the problem. He's just he had been away for so long.
Yeah. I mean, for me, as a first watch, it felt so eerily similar to Batman. Like, it just felt like a copycat movie. And I know, like you said, Oliver, like all of these movies came out after Batman 89 that just looked like they were copying Batman.
Yeah.
And this feels very much like a copycat movie, even though the history of The Shadow comes before Batman, right?
Yeah, it does. Because The Shadow has the cliches they come to expect from Batman, because he's a Bruce Wayne character. Lamont Cranston, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know where he gets his finances from, maybe the Cranston pickles or something, I don't know. Or there's Branston pickles in it, but yeah. But he's a Bruce Wayne character. You had this he has a driver, which is kind of like Alfred. To a certain degree, you could copy that, but even though it's not his butler. And, he has his alter ego, and he is very much Batman-like in terms of what he does, but obviously, the Batman has no powers and the Shadow does. In terms of even though it's kind of weird how his powers work, I suppose we'll kind of explore that in his kind of origin stories, but you can see the familiarities to Batman 89. This was down to the sort of hyper-reality of a 1940s backdrop, maybe 30s, kind of Art Deco. But the Batman 89 is a kind of a mix, though. It's kind of modern technology with this old kind of backdrop. It's kind of if the world of the future of the 40s kind of took over, and everything's kind of like retrofitted, isn't it, in Batman 89?
Yeah, that's right.
So we've got this scaffolding everywhere. You've got this kind of new tech with old tech, and that's kind of really interesting, and I think visually stunning. And then they drop all that for Batman Returns, which really annoyed me. The Anton First design only slightly carries over, and then The Shadow is very much like this is the 1930s, and it sticks to it. But you've got The Shadow has technology that kind of fits within that sort of hyper reality.
Yeah, but it's almost that sort of almost steampunky, like retro futurism sort of technology.
Yes.
Like it's stuff that could possibly exist in the 30s.
Yeah, it gets just down to his wealth. He has this like technology, maybe like 5-10 years in the future.
Yeah.
But you don't see much of it. It's only when he's how he communicates with his followers,
his agents, yes,
and giving them a ring, which is kind of like what the Phantom has a ring as well. So that kind of could that be also another link to the Shadow and Phantom in terms of who's copied what,
Yeah. Another similarity with Batman is also the villain, I felt, was quite similar to like Ra's al Ghul. So this kind of Tibetan, Eastern Asian kind of character that has supernatural kind of powers as well. It's kind of immortal, and it also has these assassins that kind of work for him, like League of Assassins.
Yeah, because he's the descendant of Genghis Khan. So Shiwan Khan as a kid, I always thought he was Genghis Khan, but it's not. He's the descendant.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long he's lived for, and how he got his followers. Are they the followers as down to who he influences with his powers? Because he's obviously he's influenced all of New York to hide this hotel that he's occupies. They don't explain properly in the movie how the powers work and what they do, what they can do.
Not really. No.
The problem is the origin story to the movie is kind of very flimsy. And when you see a movie with text come up on screen, like Judge Dredd or Superman Returns, you think, we're in trouble here because they're just cutting through stuff.
Well, yes, especially when the text appears after the prologue. And it's
That's right.
Okay, we're stopping now to explain things. This is not a good sign.
Yeah.
Especially something that you could have shown in a montage. Speaking of montages, you could have shown him being trained in the ways of the Tolku. Or it is peculiar, the similarities with Batman. But I guess it's the same situation that you had with John Carter of Mars, that when it was finally adapted for the big screen, everyone looked at it and thought, well, we're familiar with all of this. We've seen it in Star Wars. And you think, well, no, this predates Star Wars. It's just that Star Wars has raided the kitty. And I think Batman had kind of stolen some of the Shadow's thunder by the time it rolled out of the gates.
Also boils down with like how Star Wars borrowed from Dune, you know. So you kind of see like, oh, that, you know, they may have dropped some things on the Lynch version to sort of hide any sort of comparisons that potentially could be there. But also, you know, with the Shadow, you've had the follow. Well, after Batman, we had Dick Tracy, which also had shades of the Shadow. When Lamont Cranston puts on his disguise, he becomes this Dick Tracy-like villain face to him.
Yeah,
like, why does he have to become like an ugly man with this massive schnoz? It's kind of like, also it goes with his famous line: "Is the Shadow knows?" But everyone always, as it becomes a meme, because it's like his nose, he's massive, so the Shadow knows, isn't it? So it's it's odd, isn't it? When you see like the transition when I think later on in the movie where his mask comes off and you see his kind of ugly face kind of morph down into Alec Baldwin. Yeah, it's kind of strange why they have to, when they created the Shadow, he had to have this kind of somewhat of a disfigured face.
Yeah,
in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it boils down to the powers not really being there explained. I guess he's making everyone see him as this other big-nosed guy with the scarf on, as a disguise, I guess, you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking, Dan. Yeah. But because it's like he's trained in the origin story, like he's dealing with opium. He's an opium dealer, drug lord, and he's then taken by the Tibetan monks to be trained to, because he can see like the evil within people, can't he? He has the foresight to see the dark side, and he has this kind of influence over people. So they want to master that skill, and then he becomes a good guy, then goes to New York, and he's got all this money, and he's wealthy. He becomes this Bruce Wayne bachelor of the city, and his uncle is the police chief detective or head of the police. So we can influence him to stop him from, you know, them discovering who he is or getting involved with the Shadow's antics. And that's kind of fine, but because David Koepp, you know, he'd written Jurassic Park around this time, so this was an early script for David Koepp. He'd obviously become a very popular and very sought-after writer. You know, you'd think writing the origin stories would be a bit more fleshed out. But I think back in the day, and I think also it's a very efficient way to tell an origin story, is to give them a little bit at the beginning and then feed in their backstory through conversation throughout the rest of the film. So he bumps into people or has and he bring up kind of like some of their backstory, which is quite effective way to do it, to condense time. But why is he in Asia? Why is this American guy in Asia? You don't really know. And that always bothered me. But once he becomes a Shadow and we get to New York, it gets, you know, visually interesting. And I think the strength of the movie is production design, cinematography, and the music. I mean, Jerry Goldsmith's score is phenomenal throughout this movie.
It's amazing, yeah.
It is, yeah. And this is one of those ironic situations where, because I'm such a complete Jerry Goldsmith nut, I know that...
Oh, you got the CD?
I do, yes. I have Entrada's CD. So I know the score very, very well and had never seen the movie. So I'm watching the movie and sort of seeing like the music video version of this score that I love. Which is probably the wrong way round to do it, but I've done it so many times. Because Jerry, fantastic composer, he didn't always get the best assignments.
No.
So you either have to force yourself to watch a lot of unfortunate films, and I kind of put The Shadow in that camp, I'm sorry to say.
Conrad, you naughty man. Yeah, I mean, that's the saying with Goldsmith, you know, he scored Supergirl, you know, not a great movie, incredible score. King Solomon's Mines, canon schlock. great score, terrible film. That's the thing with Goldsmith. He just took the job, and and he did a lot more action scores compared to John Williams, and that's why Jerry Goldsmith's action music, it's like Rambo trilogy, and sound incredible. And then The Shadow itself, it's just loads of his little motifs or little flourishes of kind of electronic sound effects, like it's part of the score, because you think it would actually be a sound effect, but it's actually part of the score with a sort of a whoosh of the Shadow's cape or something, it sounds like, or when he transforms into, or he goes into a shadow and comes out of it, it's part of the score, not an actual sound effect.
And he has that weird rising synth tone whenever he's influencing people's minds.
That's it. Yeah. And you've got the great Morticia Adams kind of look on the eyes. So good. Yeah. So good, that stuff.
Yeah, the cinematography is Stephen Burham. Yeah, and I did love the way that he was doing some of the effects live on set, that when Alec Baldwin would start hypnotizing somebody, the lighting would actually change on set.
Yes. Every sort of introduction of Alec Baldwin, he comes out of a shadow, even when he's Lamont Cranston. He'll, like, when he walks into the amazing set of that sort of restaurant / cocktail bar.
Oh, the Cobalt Lounge.
That's right. That's it. And he walks in looking like
James Bond.
So Sean Connery as he walks in.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful introduction. Every scene he walks into is always good, and he uses his powers. And I think it's consistent throughout. It's also down to Russell Mulcahy, best known for directing music videos. Highlander, he did the first, Razorback, I think, was his first movie. And then Highlander and Highlander 2, which was a massive stinker. Oof. He did Ricochet, which is a really underrated kind of action movie. For years, Sam Raimi had wanted to do The Shadow, but he's pitched whatever to Universal. They disagreed, but they allowed him to sort of make Darkman, which was heavily inspired by The Shadow. Darkman has the energy and kind of sort of look of The Shadow. And Sam Raimi still apparently holds the rights to make a movie, but done nothing with it.
Right. Yeah. It's interesting because this movie felt like a Sam Raimi movie to me. Like all the weird lighting, like the lighting from below. So that there were all these shadows on the walls and the ceiling and stuff. That felt very Sam Raimi to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And sequences like the scene where you get to see his sort of pre-internet method of sharing information from his network of informants, which is just these vacuum tubes like you get in banks where they send money to the vault. And they're all over the city, and you get this amazing montage, this traveling shot where it's flying through the city with this piece of information down various tubes.
Oh, yeah. It's like Brazil, isn't it? Terry Gilliam's Brazil.
That's right.
Sort of, kind of future of that. And it's like loads of miniature work, as you see these sweeping shots of New York. It really stands up. Like there's a kind of period where also it's still CGI was coming in, but also that sort of mix of the optical effects and sort of a in-camera miniature work, So it's a great kind of mix of the different effects, which the 90s generally had, but they went a bit too crazy. Later part of the decade, they started getting a bit too confident with computer graphics and
a little bit too confident. Yeah. I mean, even some of the CGI in this isn't great. It's a bit ropey now, and even some of the green screen stuff is like, wow, that was the best you could do. Okay, that's fine, I guess. I mean, I guess it would have looked fine on VHS, but it doesn't quite.
There's one shot where they didn't actually finish. It's the opening sequence with him in New York, right?
Yeah.
He attacks the guys, comes out of that sort of fog shadow, which is a really cool effect. And then you see the shadow standing there. That also he reveals himself.
Yes,
but he has no cape. The cape was supposed to be bellowing in the wind, right? And then it cuts back to the guys going, freaking out. Then it cuts back to the shadow. As he walks towards them, you see his cape. So they were supposed to CGI this big cape, which they do later on.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, already an unfinished shot they feature in the film.
Oh, wow. The Shadow actually started off as a narrator, right? Like he wasn't even a real character.
That's right, yeah. It was a radio show in the 30s, and he was the narrator of these various detective stories. And apparently the listeners responded more to him than the detective stories. So he got his own series where he was played, I believe, by Orson Welles, which is not bad casting to be. Nothing to be sniffed at there. But he was also developed by Walter Gibson into a pulp novel character. So you have 300 plus pulp novels, 100 plus comic books, almost 500 radio shows, and then movie serials. So the best of which apparently is the 1940s Columbia serial starring Victor Jory in the title role. But I mean, just a massive multimedia empire around this character. And yet in 1994, I don't feel as though many people knew necessarily. He wasn't really pre-sold as an IP as he would be, in the 40s, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think only people in their maybe 40s or 50s probably would have known of the Shadow.
Yeah.
But for kids, to advertise this movie to kids, they had no clue who the Shadow is, unless they'd sort of perhaps reintroduced the character in the comic book form the last 5 years. But I was completely unaware of that. We had a Forbidden Planet shop in Cambridge. It's been there for years. It's kind of moved around location and stuff. But I never saw the Shadow. All you were sold on was the trailer. And does he look cool? He does look cool.
Yeah.
He's got a good costume. And the trailers really emphasize the action in the movie, where ultimately the action, what cripples the movie, I think, for me, I always look back at it and go, oh, they had more action scenes. There's just not enough. And they're always, when it does kick into action, it's a little bit sloppy and it's a little bit too short. So you're just kind of like wanting to see more of the Shadow do what he can do and just take out the bad guys. So I think it would have had more success if it had more action in it and there's a bit more kind of hip and cool with its kind of introduction. Or like, because Russell Mulcahy, he knows what's cool. He knows how to make cool visuals. Just ultimately the script doesn't kind of give enough action to sort of satisfy those teenagers who, I don't want to see people talking, you know what I mean? You want to see the Shadow kicking ass. And I suppose it goes into with Batman 89, doesn't really have much Batman in it.
No.
It has always annoyed me as a child. It was like, you see Batman at the beginning, he beats up those two criminals for robbing that man and his family. And then you see him at the chemical plant and he's kind of off screen for a long time till he jumps into the museum. And then he's off screen for a while and then comes back as in the Batwing, so there's kind of, and Batman Returns, there's less Batman in that. It's like, oh my God. As a teenager or a young kid, I was just so annoyed. It's like, where's Superman films never had this problem. There's constant Christopher Reeve on screen doing stuff.
Yeah.
But like watching Michael Keaton as Batman, he's barely in the suit. And it's like, so you could argue the fact that, okay, the writers thought, well, the amount of screen time we have the Shadows kind of equal to Batman. We don't have to sort of go too far, spend too much money on these visual effects, or because he's a visual effect, ultimately, he's a mix of the two. So every time you put him on screen, you've got to use CGI to introduce him or have him exit the screen or just to do a punch, so there's always that compromise. I think that's probably what they thought. It was like, we can save money by not having that many action scenes with the Shadow. And, when we do, we try and make it as big as we can, but it doesn't quite work.
It's also the fact that the Shadow is mostly invisible as well in the action scenes. I mean, he flashes on screen when he kind of appears for the punches, but apart from that, he's not supposed to be visible.
No.
So that kind of plays into maybe why you could argue he's not an exciting character, because he's not really on screen a lot. It's just more of him cackling, laughing throughout the set.
I know.
So what's so funny? What's he laughing about? Just walked into a room.
I do like the sinister side of it, though, because, again, something that Batman also probably borrowed from, and certainly David Koepp's screenplay sort of steals from the 89 Batman, because you do have that first encounter with mobsters and criminals that strikes fear into them, and he's portrayed as something that's pretty terrifying, which in Batman's case was so important to distance itself from the campy 60s series.
Yeah, spot on.
To establish its credentials. But here, it's interesting to see them take that route, and then of course he's not visible for the majority of the movie, and I think Koepp gives him this backstory which he never had in the radio series, he didn't have in the pulp novels. This backstory of him being in Asia as a drug lord is just purely a Koepp invention, I believe. And he said that he created it in order to give the Shadow a motivation, essentially. So when he says, who knows what evil lurks in the hearts of men, the Shadow knows, he thought, well, the reason he knows is because he's a reformed character who's seen the dark side. And then you can give him a nemesis who is a nemesis in the classical sense. He is the mirror image of him. He's somebody with the same skills and abilities who wants to use them to empower and enrich himself. And the Shadow is somebody who's decided to turn his back against that and to stop it. But he's always being tempted. Like Khan is always sort of trying to lure him back to the dark side throughout the story. So that's what Kep thought would be an interesting dynamic for the movie. I'm not terribly sure it works.
Well, what you just said there, Conrad, it was really interesting because it's, you've described what's kind of what Kep has done with the film, but what you said is more exciting, quite interesting, right? Because translating that into the film, it's not fully being translated. You don't get a full sense of that conflict to a degree, or the sort of, he knows the darkness in these bad guys because he was once a bad guy, so it's there, but it's just not fleshed out enough for it to give you that emotional connection to it, or to get really excited about his journey or his arc.
But I mean, one thing I did find that was different to Batman was the fact that he does have all these agents, all these people that he saves their life, and now they're indebted to him forever for the rest of their lives. Or they have to wear the ring and do whatever he wants them to do. So that's kind of interesting because Batman's a loner. He's just the one guy. I mean, before Robin and all the other people that arrive, but essentially Batman works alone, whereas the Shadow has all these helpers, all these agents that sort of help him. And also, Batman doesn't kill anyone, whereas the Shadow kind of does. Like, he shoots that shard of glass into, spoilers here, Genghis Khan at the end. Like, that's pretty brutal.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty brutal. Yeah, I think they've written it in a way where he had to sort of just get rid of him, just kill him off. But also, they don't kill him off. I know. It's to remove that part of the brain where, he can't control men's minds.
Yeah. So he ends up in an asylum screaming about being the last descendant of Genghis Khan, and everybody else is screaming about being Hitler's nephew. And
You should have had some bit of ADR, someone going, "I'm Batman," in the background. That would have been good. Yeah. It's a little throwaway line.
Yeah. There are some lovely little bits in the movie like that. I think one of the things I do enjoy is the chemistry between Alec Baldwin and Penelope Ann Miller, who's saddled with this oddly confused character who has the same powers almost. She's telepathic herself, I think.
Yeah, that was confusing.
So she's kind of this grab bag of not quite a damsel in distress because she rescues him at one point, but also a little bit ditzy. And so it's a bit of a confusing character, but you can't deny that the scenes that they have together are really fun to watch, and the dialogue is fun in those scenes as well.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's you forget about who's in this sometimes, because Tim Curry's in it, who is like there to provide some comedy and to play a sleazy friend of Margot Lane.
Yes.
And then you've got Ian McKellan in it, who's
totally underutilized,
and his performance is ultimately very forgettable. As you say, Dan, he's like underutilized, so his skill set is not used as an actor. He just plays this kind of bumbling man who's creating this like atomic bomb, who's really forgetful, is colorblind. Yeah. And the wonderful line where Margot goes, "Oh, I'm utterly depressed." And he goes, "Oh, that's nice, dear." It's a great little funny moment, And he's kind of wasted. Yeah. But you got, Jone Lone, who plays the villain.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible actor. Last Emperor. I mean, he's just phenomenal. He doesn't get used that much. Maybe I think he prefers staying on stage instead of being on screen, because he's in like Rush Hour 2 and some other movies which are a bit rubbish.
Isn't his last movie in 2007? Like, what?
Yeah.
How come he hasn't done more movies?
I'm surprised they haven't used him in a Marvel movie. He has such a fantastic range and screen presence, and he's such a good villain in this. And he knows what he's doing. He knows it's like cheese, a bit like a comic book. He's going to play up to it, and he just does it wonderfully in the film. And it's just like always angers me that no one really uses him that much. Alec Baldwin has got Face Off, a fantastic villain, and that's what kind of always, despite its kind of little problems script-wise, origin story, and not enough action, I always go back to it because what really keeps it fresh for me or interesting is those performances with Alec, Penelope, and John.
Yeah, Peter Boyle as the taxi driver.
Yeah, I mean, a very respected actor. Loads of big movies he's been in.
Yeah, it's like Sir Ian McKellan before he was a Sir, of course. I mean, in '94, I don't think any of us would have really known who he was.
Yeah, it wasn't until Lord of the Rings, everyone was like, "Oh my god, he's amazing."
I I didn't know that Ian McKellan was on Coronation Street.
Right.
I didn't know that either.
From 2005 for 10 episodes. This is after Lord of the Rings and X-Men. He goes on Coronation Street.
Yeah, as a gag. It's kind of a gag appearance.
All right.
In the same way, I think Prince Charles has shown up at one point. Sorry, I should say king. I haven't gotten used to him being king still. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So it's not he's not a recurring character.
No, I think it was just a bit of a stunt casting gag for a while. No, he wasn't hard up, I don't think.
No.
Now it's time for random trivia.
Okay, Dan, what fascinating piece of trivia did you find in Genghis Khan's sarcophagus today?
Yes. Conrad, you did already, I think Conrad, or maybe it was you, Oliver, mentioned the billboard that's featured in the film. It's advertising llama cigarettes with the slogan, "I'd climb a mountain for a llama." So I think a lot of listeners would know that this is a direct reference to the Camel cigarettes ad with the slogan, "I'd walk a mile for a camel."
Right.
The original billboard also had a man blowing out smoke rings as well. So it's,
Did it
apparently
really?
in Times Square. So
Wow.
yeah, so a direct reference to that.
I had no idea. So they actually made a live billboard blow smoke.
So yeah.
That's so cool.
I could be wrong. So anyone out there correct me, but it's pretty good.
I just want it to be true.
yeah.
Okay, and that's our trivia.
Yes. It's interesting watching a superhero movie from the 90s as well, because that was like peak camp superhero, whereas you don't really get that now. I mean, Spider-Man was like that as well in the early 2000s, but you don't really get this really almost silly, goofy, wacky like superhero movie.
Yeah, I suppose now, because of Superman the movie was always, they always said it's verisimilitude. It's try and keep it faithful and true to everything, but it had its like kind of campy moments with Lex and and Otis and Valerie Perrine's character. So with Batman '89, it was basically taken very seriously, but it was obviously comedy moments with Jack Nicholson. But then you fall into this kind of the '90s period where tonally it was like, let's try and make everything like a comic book. And you could have those cheesy moments and campy moments where the tone kind of shifts a little bit. And it went too far with Schumacher and with Batman and Robin. And the studios kind of lost faith in films, only for a short period of time, because not Marvel, New Line Cinema put out Blade very shortly afterwards, which was like complete revelation. It was taking it super seriously. The X-Men was very successful. So you had this kind of weird batch of the 90s where you get one movie a year maybe, and no one really knew what it was as well. Like The Mask was this kind of comic book that was based on something that was fairly recent, but no, I didn't know about The Mask comic book. The Phantom I kind of knew about through Defenders of the Earth cartoon show from the 80s. And The Phantom had been around for decades. It was really popular in like South Africa, I think. And The Rocketeer from 91 was a comic book from the 80s. So, but I, again, as a kid, wasn't aware of. But, that's a very, very good film that didn't really do well at the box office. But I think Batman, Dick Tracy were kind of the big ones. I mean, Dick Tracy tried to copy Batman with its marketing strategy.
Yeah.
And The Shadow would try and do some of that, where you've got action figures that came out for The Shadow. You had a music video as well, which we'll kind of explore later on with the song, okay. And you had a video game that unfortunately didn't get released. It got completed, and then didn't get released because Ocean Software, who developed loads of the movie games of the 80s and 90s for the Spectrum, the Amstrad, Commodore, they did Batman and RoboCop, they did Total Recall, they did every movie license that came their way. They wanted to make a game of it, and they made The Shadow, thinking this was going to be like Batman. It's a good game. It plays like Streets of Rage, like a scrolling beat 'em up game. I played through it before on YouTube, but it's not completely. It is finished, but it's like really unbalanced. That got completely cancelled. So they saw this kind of following the strategy of like what Warner's did, Universal trying to copy that, but it just didn't quite work because it, as Conrad said, very early on, it was like number 3 on its like first week of release, behind Lion King and Speed. So it was already doomed.
I mean, comic book movies were few and far between. Whereas now, like, I feel like they could release anything and someone would watch it.
Yeah. I mean, would you say I've never seen The Spirit?
Oh, that's not good.
It's supposed to be really bad, but
is
is that a bit like The Shadow? Or is it just no? Am I making
I
a sort of
mean,
wrong comparison?
it was definitely trying to sort of ride the coattails of like Sin City. That sort of, it's got exactly the same look. I mean, it's Frank Miller again, but I don't know. It's just not well sort of fleshed out, plot and character wise.
But it's all these opportunities we've had for The Shadow to return. They'd never bothered to bring him back.
No. Yeah.
Maybe it's down to he's so out of like what is pop culture, and the comic book hasn't come back in any meaningful way. Perhaps I'm sure if there's fans listening who are fans of The Shadow, like, oh no, there's this and that out there. But generally speaking, most people, if you ask someone who loves superhero movies, about maybe 15 to 18, go, oh, if you know The Shadow, they're like, no, they wouldn't know.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
that's the thing.
It's such an old property, I guess, as well. Like it's sort of pulp character property. It's similar to when we covered Solomon Kane. It's again a really old property that just no one knows about. That movie kind of tanked as well. So
for sure.
The campy aspects of it, though, it does give rise to some of the tonal awkwardness that I found in the film. Because Jone Lone is amazing, and he manages to avoid stepping into campy Fu Manchu territory.
Sure.
But there is a scene where he's on the Empire State Building, I think.
Yes.
And a sailor misgenders him and says something about him wearing a dress because he's wearing a traditional Mongolian, I think it's a deal, I think it's called.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And he uses his hypnotic suggestive power to make this guy throw himself off the Empire State Building, but he does it in such a way that the guy knows that it's happening to him. So he's shouting out to all of his friends, I don't know what I'm doing. Stop me. Please stop me. Yeah. And then you cut to the next scene, which goes to Lamont and Margot on the streets. Yeah. And you just hear him bouncing off the different levels of the Empire State Building, going, oh, at each one. And I think the earlier bit is really disturbing. Yeah. And then this is played for laughs and not verisimilitude at all. I mean, he'd be dead on the first level. It's wonderfully sick, but I'm not sure, what movie is this? I'm not sure what I'm supposed to feel watching it.
I think it was like, how do we play into... I'm not sure in America if it was a PG or PG-13. So if it was a PG-13, you had this, like, as you're saying, it's kind of dark element where he's going to make this guy commit suicide. And then to lower that rating down, to avoid it being an R, you'd play it for comedy.
Yeah.
So you switch your route. They often do that. You play something for a little bit harsh and you play it off as comedy. So you completely shift the tone quickly. But then you do it too much, you have this kind of very uneven tone throughout the movie. I don't think The Shadow is uneven throughout. It's just this kind of, as you mentioned, Conrad, you have these kind of little bits that come in that feel a bit out of place, perhaps.
Yeah. There are some quite dark bits, like when Jone Khan makes that guy shoot himself. It's pretty like, whoa, it's full on.
Yeah.
And it's Neelix.
Yeah.
It's Ethan Phillips from Voyager.
Oh, yeah.
He makes Neelix shoot himself. I mean, that's unforgivable. Another thing that I found uneven as well, David Koepp talks about they actually had a rehearsal period, which is, a luxury these days. And they discovered that as well as being very well cast, Alec Baldwin, who is hot at the time coming off of Hunt for Red October, he's able to play the darkness. So he's very good at being a man about town, a socialite in a tuxedo, but he's also very good at being slightly unnerving and frightening at the same time, which is great. But they also discovered, Koepp says that he had a lot of one-liners.
Right.
So you have things like him saying in the movie, psychically, I'm very well endowed or something. And it's...
That's right.
That's great. That always gets a laugh.
But I'm not sure that it really fits the material or the era necessarily.
Well, when he kills that guy and they fall off the building and the weight of the shadow and obviously the fall kills the guy and the shadow goes to him, next time you'll be on top or something like that.
Yes,
well, then you're dead then. I don't know. But then it's like a weird, again, throws into the sexual kind of little, comments Alec threw in, perhaps.
Yeah, no, Koepp was enamoured of them and so inserted them into the script, but I'm not sure that they fit, really. I mean, I enjoyed them, but I'm still just sort of looking at the movie thinking, what is this?
Yeah, I mean, the last act is what doesn't work for me. It just felt
Right.
Yeah, it felt very quick.
I know that the movie has been cut down quite a bit.
Yeah.
The Hall of Mirrors near the end sequence was heavily cut down because they had an earthquake, which was the famous earthquake of 94, 93. You know, they featured it, some of the footage in A New Nightmare, the Wes Craven film. They actually went out, with their cameras and just filmed all this destruction because it's just like amazing production value for nothing, right? In the making of the movie, there's a featurette or something like that they put out. You see the shadow see like Shiwa Khan, all the mirrors. He's like, bam, 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 shooting them all. That's not in the film. You know, you just see him kind of shoot one, then sort of goes around, and suddenly he uses his powers and blows up all the mirrors, right? But it feels so cut short, this whole finale. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing photography, and it's very Enter the Dragon, with the look, and Russell Mulcahy, he can use those kind of like breaking up the panels to show you different faces and stuff. So it's very clever with how it looks, but it's just kind of, you feel a bit shortchanged by the end. There's another sequence where Lamont Cranston goes to meet Tim Curry's character. You know, there's no sequence where he tracks him down or phones him or something like that. They meet each other in this kind of dome-like structure, and it's flooded.
Yeah.
But you feel like there's scenes missing. They're being cut. Things don't quite cut together as one would expect.
Yeah, like, I mean, his way to get out is just to call Margot, get her to open the door.
She gets there really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, she's like across town.
She does, thankfully.
Driving through traffic just to get to him. And all she has to do is just open the door.
Yeah.
And that's it. There's no like weird, elaborate way of getting out. It's just like, oh yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Gives her some agency and something to do, at least.
No, I mean, I did like that aspect of it, but
I like the part where they're chasing after the bomb in the hotel with it gives Ian McKellan and Penelope Ann Miller something to do, this comedic kind of like thing where they're chasing after it and they fall over the stairs and he's about to cut the wire, but also he's colorblind, so she's got to help him, and the shadow's in this kind of like Flash Gordon floor which kind of tilts itself, and he's like, and then he goes down a super fun happy slide. Again, action scenes that are kind of set up really nicely but don't really deliver on what was happening in cinema in the mid-90s, because in 94 you got True Lies, which is bonkers with the action, really explosive, really over the top, and speed as well, the bus that won't slow down, so how cinema had evolved in terms of action, the Shadow was kind of way behind in delivering that for those, action fans who are hungry to see something what the Shadow can do, and it doesn't really exploit that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just the sort of limitations with visual effects of the time as well. I mean, that's why comic book movies are thriving right now, because they just can throw everything. They can do anything now. Yeah,
they don't really deploy the fact that the Shadow could know some sort of martial arts, but he doesn't do anything like that. He'll just shoot you.
Yeah,
which kind of makes sense. Just cut to the point, but shoot.
Yeah, I mean, using his powers a little bit more, maybe, like his powers of suggestion.
Yeah, and he could like levitate stuff, right? So
at the end,
like throw stuff at people. Have a chair, have a table. There you go.
I could never figure out what he was able to do and what he wasn't able to do.
Who are you? The Shadow knows, but I don't. So
no. Well, and then you find out he doesn't know. It's just that he's got a network of informers that are all indebted to him. So he doesn't actually know anything either. So he's just some rich, handsome dude who can telepathically confuse people, possibly. I'm not sure.
Yeah. And he comes up with the name Atomic Bomb before Atomic Bomb was invented. Well, in that history of the movie,
Roll over Oppenheimer.
Yeah. Maybe Oppenheimer was the Shadow. That'd be a new spin-off movie.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I'd pay to watch that.
Coming to you live from the Movie Oubliette Theatre, it's the prestigious Mobley Awards.
Hello, it's that special time of the pod at the Movie Awards where we nominate our favourite gothically heroic parts of the film in a number of invisible yet shadow casting categories.
Best quote.
I'm going to go with the Shadow knows, because it's just so obvious, and it's like it's the easy one, isn't it? He says it a number of times.
Yeah,
he does. Yeah. My favourite quote comes from Roy's wife. So this is one of the characters that's indebted to the Shadow and is recruited into his network.
Yes.
And Roy's wife says, "You know, I think they made up the Shadow to make people listen to the radio more."
That's good. That is good, man. I like that.
That's great, actually.
It's a really clever meta quote that she comes out with.
Spot on.
Best hair or costume?
I think the Shadow's suit is amazing, and at the
Yes.
end, it's the best. Where he takes the coat off, and he's got the big collar and the gun holster, which I always like to refer to as a gun bra. So it's like he looks his best at the end. Looks really cool. So I'll go with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I love the whole. It's all black. It's almost Zorro-esque, but it's like a 30s suit with the big cape and then the red scarf and the fedora. It's just it's a great outfit.
Yeah. Well, I went with his nemesis because I'm always drawn to evil people, Shiwan Khan, who has this amazing cloak at one point that perfectly matches the ornate black and gold floor tiles in the room that he's in.
Yeah.
And so Russell Mulcahy positions the camera over the top of him, and you don't even realise that it's part of his
That's
costume.
right. Yeah.
Until he slowly stands up and the floor seems to gather up around him. It's
Yes,
beautifully
that's
done.
right. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Most 90s moment.
You could put this under a cliche, but I think the 90s moment is having a song during the end credits, which was very... I mean, it's part of the 80s as well, but having a score like that is very much tonally very straight with its execution. But then you have a pop song at the end, a big power ballad, Original Sin. No, it's Original Sin, whatever it's called. And it was, I weirdly, when I didn't know much about the movie, we had cable TV and a channel called The Box where you could, phone up to put the music video you want on, and that song was on a lot on The Box. I was like, oh wow, I saw clips of the movie, and I don't mind the song actually. I think it's quite good, but it's very much like, okay, we'd have a pop song at the end to try and sell the movie with a marketing plan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's very sort of very 90s, and like again, Batman Forever has it, Batman Robin has it. Batman has Prince, but I'm not sure it's doing the end credits. I think they just the songs are featured in the film as part of part of it. But I don't think the Rocketeer did that. But yeah, the Shadow has a song, so it kind of feels very much of that decade.
Yeah.
Mine was the most 90s thing about this is the 1930s.
It was very popular, wasn't it? In the 90s.
It really was, and in lots of different genres. So you had the Rocketeer and the Phantom, as we've mentioned already, but a lot of crime stories like Miller's Crossing, Last Man Standing, even Woody Allen's Bullets Over Broadway, sort of set in the same milieu.
Yeah.
And then you have The Green Mile and Life. You had a lot of prison movies set in the 1930s for some reason.
Well, you had like in the 80s, the filmmakers were obsessed with the 50s, weren't they? Like Zemeckis, Joe Dante, Spielberg, and the 90s. I don't know who decided. Someone decided, I think people are really interested in the 1930s and 40s now.
Yeah.
I think, are they? I don't think they were, because it's like that's the weird thing. I think it's just down to because Batman's influence that, okay, because we've created this kind of world and people seem to react to it well, let's try and replicate that or go back to that period. But it only works for that movie, generally. But then could you introduce a Shadow in the 90s set in contemporary times? I think it would have been not as visually interesting. So you've got that aspect.
Yeah.
So it's kind of you've got a flip side to everything, haven't you?
Yeah, you do.
Favorite scene?
It's the Hall of Mirrors. Despite it being cut short, it looks amazing for what it is, and I think it's just visually really interesting, and it plays on Russell Mulcahy's music video style, direction, and Jerry Goldsmith's score is just like, as a piece, is incredible. And I put it on YouTube, not YouTube, but on Facebook, and my friend listened to it while he's on the toilet, and he goes, "Oh, that was the most epic trip to the toilet I've ever had." He's listening to the music, just going for a dump. So I was like, "Yeah, okay.
Wow. Okay.
I hope you're happy, But yeah, it was just that whole sequence. I just wish it was just played out longer, but it is such a great finale that is cut short.
Yeah.
My favourite was another visually striking scene, which was the dream sequence, the really striking, fiery one with Penelope Ann Miller.
Oh, yeah. That's good.
Very, very see-through gown. But there's also a dream sequence with Alec Baldwin ripping his own face off. Which
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah.
I love.
That feels so very Sam Raimi as well. Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
you know.
it
does.
It did.
Yeah.
It did. Full on, like almost like body horror.
Yeah.
Like, wow, where did that come from?
Very clever with the transitions. They put like a lamp
Yes, that's
in
right.
front, just hide the cut. You know, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
Most cliche moment.
I was going to say the action hero is shot in the shoulder and it doesn't impede him at all.
Oh, good one, Conrad. Good
just
one.
a flesh wound. Yeah.
It's a flesh wound.
Just a flesh wound, yeah. And he's even stabbed with a magic knife in the same shoulder later in the movie. And I was just flashing back to the Steve Martin film Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, where he gets shot in the shoulder in the same place over and over again and says, "This is never going to heal."
That is good.
Love it.
Oh dear.
All right, cliche for me. So if you've got a cabaret lounge in a movie, like it always starts with the singer starting a song, like in a sultry
course.
treat as well.
Yeah.
Like that
Of
is
course.
the establishing shot of every cabaret lounge scene.
Man, spot on, Dan. Spot on. Yeah, so true.
It's so true. Oh gosh, I'm having flashbacks to Dark City. Thinking of
Rocketeer
Alice
does it
Broyles.
as well.
Rocketeer was
Yeah,
one
it
I thought
does.
about. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Best special effect.
It's got to be when he appears on the stairs
Ah.
in the hotel.
Yes.
That is the best sort of showing you appearing from shadow or out of like the fog, as it were. You know, just into being on camera. It's just like, and then it's got the on-set sort of flashing lighting, strobe lighting as well, to sort of simulate the lightning outside the building. It's all kind of tease up so well, and you'd have to, you know,
Yeah.
and he turns to camera with the classic look of the hat and the mask, and the lightning goes off.
Yeah.
And it's all just like amazing visuals. And as I said, it's trailer fodder material. You just go, every trailer would have that. That looks fucking great, but put it in the trailer. you know,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's the best shot, easily.
My favourite was the sailor falling off the Empire State Building, even though I have issues with it.
Bouncing.
But the physics are really convincing, and it's a hand-animated CGI element.
Oh, yeah.
Animated by a guy named Fumi Mishimo at Illusion Arts, apparently.
Oh wow.
So,
Oh,
yeah, nicely done.
yeah,
Yeah.
very well done.
Yeah.
And done for comedy as well.
Favorite sound effect.
Yeah, I think we were discussing the music, and because it's as composers do, and how the mix of sound effects, it's often the case is who's fighting for what in terms of the space of the soundtrack. And
Sure.
I think the sound effect of in his score, with the sort of, as Conrad said, a sort of build up, dum 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 dum, the kind of whoosh sound he puts in, I think kind of works really well. I think because everything else in the movie, there isn't a unique sound to the movie. I don't think. I think it's very plays on sounds you've kind of heard before, kind of somewhat modernized. It's not like you watch Star Wars and go, that's really interesting sound effect like Ben Burtt would do. But in terms of the shadow, I think it's kind of more down to Jerry Goldsmith being creative and creating synthesized sound effects to sort of utilize in the movie. That's part of the score itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of what I like about it.
Yeah.
Well, my favourite sound effect in this movie is also a Jerry Goldsmith pull, which is the moment when, it's a delicious moment, Lamont tries to give Margot hypnotic suggestions to forget him, and it does not work because she also has his power. So she just looks blankly at him and says, "Are you drunk?" She doesn't really understand what he's doing. And Jerry Goldsmith in the background has fully employed his cyclical sort of hypnotic figure with the synthesizers. And as soon as it becomes apparent it's not working, he pulls the plug on it and it unwinds like a record player slowing down. And it's hilarious. I don't know if Jerry designed it that way or if some enterprising sound designer did it, but it's a lovely moment.
That's really good. Yeah, good choice, man.
Most funniest moment.
Well, I mentioned it earlier with Tim Curry going, "The shadow, where?" You know, I love that little moment. And when Margot says she's utterly depressed, and McKellan just goes, "Oh, that's nice, dear." You know, so there's other little moments, yeah. But those two always stood out. As a kid, this Tim Curry, because Tim Curry's always kind of deployed to be because he's so good at humour, being comical. And, there's no reason for Tim Curry to be in this movie, because he's just, I think that 90s period is a jobbing actor, and he's popped up in everything. It's to have a supporting role, so, I wouldn't say no to have Tim Curry in the movie anyway. I'd always be like, yeah, put him in it. He's funny. So, yeah, I think with Claymore's always good. And a bit when he goes, "You chicken," he's he's fired all his bullets. He just looks Tim Curry and his eye bags. You always need I think the eye bags have their own role, don't they, in the movie with Tim?
Yeah.
They're paid as well.
The only time in the movie when I laughed out loud, very, very loudly, was after the horror scene where Lamont rips his face off to reveal Shiwan Khan. He goes to tell Margot and ask her if she slept well, and she describes this wonderful dream where she was on a beach or something and having a lovely time. And she asks him about his dream, and he says, "I ripped my own face off." And she just replies, "You have problems."
Yes. I love how he responds as well. It's like, I'm aware of them.
Yeah. And that's our Moobly Awards.
Yeah.
Yay.
Hello, this is Robert Picardo, and you're listening to Movie Oubliette.
It's time for our final verdicts. Should The Shadow from 1994 be set free from its solid silver sarcophagus bonds, rule the minds of all cinema lovers and be worshipped? Or should it be stabbed with a 90s CGI flying dagger and be thrown back into the oubliette, lost in the annals of history? All right, Oliver, it's The Shadow. Does this movie still hold up for you?
Yeah, it does. It does. I think the strength of its visuals, its production design, the music and performances help it stand up. It's got obvious faults with its action and the story, with its things aren't well explained, and it kind of expects the audience to fill in the gaps, perhaps. And it could be down to the fact that Universal may have, cut it down from maybe a 2-hour 20 movie down to 1:48 or something. Mm-hmm. But it's, after what? It's been over nearly 30 years since it came out, and it still holds up in many ways. And I think it's a film that should be sort of, reassessed, analysed by potentially younger fans of superhero movies, just to sort of demonstrate you can do things a little different and not be so stuck to the sort of regiment way that Marvel puts stuff out and how they construct their movies. Have something that's a little bit more playful, has more fun with the genre. And show a character that is flawed, but he's not a straightforward good guy, but he has darker elements. Very much you could argue with the same with Batman, but there's a lot more stuff you can do with the Shadow, I think, than the film kind of portrays. But I think there's enough there to sort of keep a younger audience engaged and show them some cool visuals. And I think that's why I still go back to it now and again. And it's not a perfect movie, it's not a bad movie. It's just a very easy film to watch. I think that's the good thing about it. It's you can put it on and not be offended by it. It's just kind of an easy watch.
What did you think, Dan?
I want to hear your thoughts first.
I'm scared.
It's funny coming to it afresh because on the one hand, it's sort of nostalgic to see a bit of blockbuster 90s or 80s style filmmaking that you've not seen, because so many things now are sort of emulating that style or trying to recapture it. So to actually find one that is vintage, that's just been locked in the oubliette and forgotten about, and it's quite fun, it's quite nostalgic. And like so many of the films that we've discovered that bombed when they were first released, there's nothing really wrong with it in the way that would make you hate it. But again, you can see why everybody criticised it at the time, because critically it was pretty mixed, I think, the response.
For sure.
And I think the problems that we've identified with it, there are weaknesses in the writing, and certainly it's been compromised by the earthquake in the finale. I don't know. I find it very difficult to decide. It's beautiful to look at. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Tonally, it's a bit all over the map, but I kind of like the three central performances a lot, and I did sort of enjoy it, so I don't know, I'm kind of ambivalent about it. It could go either way with me.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay, Dan.
I mean,
Where are you going to go
right
with
off
this?
the bat, I wish I'd seen this movie as a kid. I think I would have loved it. Like, I do realize it has flaws, and I don't think the third act works at all. But I was always interested. Like, every scene, there's just something interesting, whether it's the dialogue or the sort of character dynamics between all the different characters, or just the superhero aspect of, the cackling villain. It's great. The matte paintings are amazing. The cityscape of New York is just incredible to see. Like, I loved every single scene has just this kind of background of Gothic New York, sort of reimagined. It's a really great visual film with funny moments and ridiculous moments. It's kind of all the things I wish comic book movies were still, because they're just so serious now. And so, I don't know, they're just trying to please everyone. And whereas this movie isn't, it's kind of...
It's interesting.
its own thing,
Yeah. I remember doing the 90s. Me and my friends would complain about, it's another Danny Elfman score. It sounds like this. It sounds like Batman. It sounds like Dick Tracy. Especially when Spider-Man came out. And then after a number of years being inundated with Hans Zimmer type scores, you're like, oh my God, I wish for a Danny Elfman score. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So it's kind of, now it's like, I wish superhero films would have this, not be stuck to a formula and just go crazy with it, or just, we can do our own thing.
Yeah.
And just take a risk.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it does go a bit bonkers with the superpowers in this movie. Like, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, how do you make the entire city think a building's not there? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me.
No.
But yeah,
so you're setting it free.
I would recommend this movie. I would set this movie free.
Yay! Okay. Well, so if I were a no vote, we would have to go to our patrons for the decider to see where they landed. Hello, Hal.
Yes, Conrad.
It's time for the patrons vote, please.
Great news. They set it free.
Oh, they did.
Hooray!
Interesting.
Yeah, 83% to 17%. Eddie Coulter says, I have a soft spot for the classic pulp heroes like The Shadow, The Phantom and Doc Savage, so I say set him free. Like the Phantom movie starring Billy Zane, I find The Shadow to be a fun popcorn movie that should be given a second chance.
There we go.
Yeah. Film aficionado says, The Shadow is like when I try to cook for my wife. I attempt to follow the directions, but end up adding too much of one ingredient and not enough of another. The end result is edible, and it looks vaguely like the food item pictured on the box, but one might say it's a shadow of its original intent.
That is good.
Ultimately, I throw the remaining food into our oubliette, our nickname for the garbage disposal, while laughing maniacally to myself. I'm not sure if that's a recommendation or not.
No.
but it's wonderful.
Oh, it's wonderfully worded. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So thanks,
Wordsmith.
aficionado. And finally, Jasmine said, the late 80s and early 90s brought us some gorgeous looking and incredibly fun one-off superhero movies, such as The Punisher, The Rocketeer, The Phantom with Billy Zane, and of course The Shadow. While I would have liked The Shadow to have been more tightly written, it's still breathtaking to behold and certainly worth a look. So some common themes there.
Yeah. All right.
So I think we're setting it free, guys.
All right. Be free.
Off you go.
The sun is shining, but the ice is slippery.
So, Oliver, it's been amazing having you on the show to talk to us about The Shadow. Where can our listeners follow you and find more of your views on movies?
Well, you have to make a visit to YouTube and just put in Oliver Harper and you'll find all my stuff there, my retrospective reviews on movies on the 80s and 90s, new reviews on the new releases, and I've covered a bunch of video games that explore history of the Robocop games, Batman and the Terminator. So a wide mix and some audio commentaries with previous interviewee, Rob Hill, or guest as it were. We've done some recent commentaries on the Terminator films and Aliens. So more to come.
Yes, I've listened to a few of those. They're amazing.
And listeners, if you want to follow Movie Oubliette, we are everywhere on all platforms as Movie Oubliette. And you can also email us at movie.oubliette@gmail.com.
Yes, and if you want to support the show, which we really appreciate, head on over to Patreon, where for as little as $1, you can nominate films. For $5, you get access to our exclusive monthly minisodes, and for $10, you can be an executive producer of the show, like Chazilla, Eddie Coulter, Isaac Sutton, Dr. Doggy, Serge of Cold Crash Pictures, Iconographer, and Ryan.
Thank you for all the support. We also have merchandise on Redbubble and a YouTube channel as well. And if you haven't already, why not give us a rating and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you are listening to us? It does help us out a lot.
It does.
All right, Conrad, it's that time to reveal the movie for next episode.
Yes, indeed. And it's going to be a patron's choice. They've been nominating things all week for us, including things like Looker from James, the Rock and Roll Nightmare from Ryan.
Ooh.
Keeper Anthony gave us Barbarella. Serge gave us Tammy and the T-Rex. Chazilla suggested Maximum Overdrive.
Oh, yes, the Stephen King one.
Yeah. Boss Salvage said No Escape, which is a Ray Liotta futuristic prison drama I hadn't thought about in years.
Okay.
Yeah, some great choices in there. So let's spin that oubliette roulette and find out which one's going to be.
Okay. Give it a whirl, Conrad.
Ooh.
All right. Here we go.
Round it goes.
Spinning. And it is...
Oh, Time Rider.
Oh, okay. I've never heard of this one.
Okay, so this one has been nominated by James many times. So I'm quite excited for him that it's finally come up on the oubliette. It is called Time Rider, The Adventure of Lyle Swan. It's directed by William Deere, who I remember directed Bigfoot and the Hendersons.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And it stars Fred Ward, Peter Coyote, Belinda Bauer, Ed Lauter, Tracy Walter, Richard Mesa, and L.Q. Jones.
Okay. So I'm assuming a time travel movie.
Yeah, 1982 science fiction western.
Oh,
So
okay.
I have no idea.
Yeah, me neither.
So, yeah, that's going to be fun. Looking forward to that.
Yes. Woohoo. All right, listeners, that's it for another episode. Thanks again, Oliver, for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me on the show, and it's been a pleasure. And I look forward to hearing more of your podcasts.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Listeners, until next time, goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
We review the films others tend to forget. Come with us and open up the movie oubliette.
Next time, you get to be on top.